Welcome to the first episode in a Legendarium series of strange but true stories from the ancient world. In this episode, we will talk about how olives made and unmade ancient Greece. We will talk about how olives were so valuable to the ancient Greeks that they considered them to be a gift from the goddess Athena, in part because olive oil was a critical part of their trade network. However, there were signs of trouble when the Greeks began overplanting their olive trees, which eventually led to disastrous soil erosion. The olive held great importance for the ancient Greeks, beyond its nutritional value. It was believed to be a gift from the goddess Athena, and the Greeks revered a particular olive tree growing on the Acropolis because they believed it to have been planted by the goddess personally. Indeed, according to Greek myth, the city of Athens promised to name their community after the god which gave them the greatest gift. Poseidon gave Athens a waterway, which provided them with drinking water and access to the sea. And then Athena gave them the olive tree, which provided food and oil. Of course, that was judged to be the better gift. The olive was associated with victory and honor. Ancient Olympic athletes were rewarded for their victories with wreaths of olive leaves. Even Hercules was said to have performed his 12 labors with a club made from an olive tree. But the olive also helped to promote trade. Trade had been a fact of Greek life since the Bronze Age, when the movement of copper and tin became the basis for the first known trade networks in the region. After the beginning of the Classical Age, trade was expanded greatly by the construction of specialized merchant ships and a hullway across the Isthmus of Corinth, where ships could be moved from one side to the other on greased logs, bypassing a long and difficult journey around Greece. Permanent trading centers emerged, where merchants of all nations gathered. They included Naucratis in Egypt, Gravisca in Eritrea, Almina in Asia Minor, and of course the Athenian port of Piraeus, which became the most important trade center in the Mediterranean. Within Greece, city-states tended to trade essentials like cereals, wine, olives, figs, cheese, and honey. Outside Greece, the Greeks imported a variety of goods like Egyptian slaves, Black Sea grain, salted fish, timber from Macedonia for shipbuilding, and metals like iron, tin, and copper from the Balkans and parts of Italy. So how did the Greeks pay for these goods? One of their main commodities was the olive. Olives were an ideal cash crop, as the trees were long-lasting, reliable, and very productive. After pressing the oil, it could be easily stored in giant clay vessels called amphorae. Olive oil kept for weeks during sea voyages, and there was a market for it throughout the Mediterranean. Indeed, the olive oil trade became so important to the Greek economy that an early stock exchange was based on olive oil's export value. In part because the oil trade was so profitable, most olive plantations were held by wealthy landowners who used tenant farmers and slaves to work their trees. As more and more landowners turned to the profitable olive trees to satisfy a seemingly bottomless market, they abandoned other crops. While most trees have branching networks of roots that hold soil in place, olive trees only have a single taproot that burrows straight down to the limestone shelf. In dry times, the taproot simply burrows deeper. This causes the topsoil to grow unstable. The problem could be corrected by properly ditching and terracing the farmland, which prevented soil erosion. At first, the Greeks performed this arduous but necessary toil, and the olive oil trade continued. However, these terraces required constant upkeep. Just a few weeks of missed repairs to stone terracing allowed patches of soil to slip. Grazing goats came into the terraces and kicked away the stones, which allowed the rain to wash away topsoil in even greater quantities. And even worse, since tenant farmers and slaves working the olive plantations tended to do the minimum necessary work, leaving the soil unwatered, these lands became suitable for only one crop, the olive. The wealthier cities became extraordinarily dependent on the olive oil trade, as they could not grow enough food for their large populations anymore. And in the end, it was war that brought the whole system crashing down. During the Peloponnesian War, fought about 2,400 years ago, Greece had become profoundly dependent on grain imports from abroad, paid for by olive oil profits. When Sparta blockaded Athens during the war, it caused both an economic crash and a famine. Manpower shortages caused by the war led to severe soil erosion. In the generations to come, the amount of arable land within Greece shrank disastrously as soil poured down the terraced hills into stream beds. By the time Rome conquered Greece 5 centuries later, Greece had less than 1/4 the arable land they did during the Peloponnesian War. And that wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you saw, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.